The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is Genesis and the Re-Education of the Human Mind.
Hey everyone, it's time for Created in the Image of God. I'm here in the studio with Joseph Atman. He is the founder of Middle Tree. Before that, he had a PhD in the philosophy of religion, and he is going to be working with Soup Media and its new acquisition, Planksip, to make some of his ideas and work that he did in A Philosophical War more accessible to the mainstream, even as he continues to assist with building out Middle Tree to reach all ages, from the very first learning experiences on into adult education. Welcome to the studio, Joe.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you for having me. And as I said before, thank you not just for having me here today, but thank you for, incorporating me into something or other publishing and being interested in the work that I've done. You're one of my biggest and best champions, and that is really, really appreciated. So thank you.
Well, your work really, really resonated with me, not only because it dives into the book of Genesis, which is probably my favorite book of all. And it's the foundation of everything. And for me, my whole life has been spent sort of trying to get to the top of Mount Everest so I could survey the landscape and see what's really going on from the 50,000 foot level. I just like to have that overview. I don't like to be lost in some valley somewhere, not knowing which way is up and which way is north, stumbling around in a cloud of darkness and confusion. So for me, going back to the book of Genesis helps with that. And the fact that you unpacked it in such a different way really resonated. And of course, that's part of the reason you're here on this show. The other part is your focus on education. So we're going to talk a little bit about your background and how you got started with Middle Tree, right? So let's start there by telling us a little bit, share with us your educational journey. When did you feel like you were destined to go on and pursue a PhD? Did that desire start real early, or what was it that led to that monumental effort? Because that in itself is a climb up Mount Everest.
Certainly. No, I was to say I was not a good student in high school is a bit of an understatement. It was questionable in my senior year as to whether or not I was going to graduate. So it kind of what happened, and this is a story I frequently tell across a number of different spectrums, is I sincerely had an interest to learn and a genuine curiosity about things. And I really like to read, and I love to write and to think about stuff. And I had this dictaphone. I think I had my first dictaphone, with like a little tape, like an actual tape in it, like tape recorder, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, something like that. And I would, record all my thoughts into it and all this stuff. And, had all these stories and, things that I would play out, stuff like the kids do. Then I got to middle school, and for some reason, things got really difficult for me. I encountered subjects that I wasn't familiar with. Things just started to not click, right? And I started to bring home bad grades, and that trend continued on into high school. And, at some point, especially when you don't have coping skills as a young person, you begin to buy into the narrative of the primary organization, institution, or faction that's telling you about how intelligent you are, right? And for most young people in the world today, that's what school says about you, what your grades say about you. And I really just believed that I was not very smart. I was not very capable. that I was not very worthy. And that narrative about myself, that belief, that idea about myself, permeated all sorts of different avenues within my life and in my own upbringing. And I was generally, I'm a very positive person. But again, when you're younger and hormonal and you're experiencing all these things for the first time, that can be a really difficult road to navigate when you don't have that inborn belief in yourself gets extracted because you start to tell a different story. So I was just not a good student, but there was one thing that I was good at, which was writing. And there was no AP or anything back in the day, but I was in an honors English class in high school, in my senior year, and there was this one class that you could take. It was only for seniors. It was called Religious Quest. It was taught by the head of the English department, a man by the name of Dr. Griffith. And Dr. Griffith, he was sort of this legendary figure within our high school. And he taught this one class, and it was supposed to be this life-changing class and like a college course. And he treated you very differently than you got treated by any of your other teachers. That was the word, right? And once I got into that class, it did not disappoint. He was phenomenal. That course opened me up to all these different ideas and notions, and we talked about spirituality and religion, not just as religion, but as something that was incorporated into a person's daily life. I excelled in that class, and he noticed it. And he took me aside one day and said, Joey, what are you doing with your life? And I said, I don't know. And he said something that changed my life right there and then. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, well, you have a very powerful mind, and I think you should do something with it. Because he knew me, he knew what, I didn't go to a huge high school, and it was a bigger high school, but it was, I think teachers had a good idea about who their students were and what was going on. And he knew me. And, he took an interest in me and had some obvious concern. And he said this thing to me that, you have a very powerful mind, and I think you should use it. And he wasn't saying I was so super smart. He was saying I was capable. He was saying that I to not believe the narrative that I had put out there about myself. And that, again, changed my whole outlook on myself. I did graduate high school. He took me to Hofstra University, which I grew up in outside of Chicago. And he took me to Hofstra University in New York. He knew about this program within Hofstra University that he thought I would excel at. And again, this is me in my 1.7 GPA or whatever. I got like the red carpet treatment at Hofstra University, had lunch at the President's Club, got to meet this private tour of the campus, got to meet all these people. And anyways, I wound up going to Hofstra in this program called New College. I won't get into what New College is, but it's there's only a few new colleges in the world. It started at Oxford University, if you've ever heard of Oxford University. So it's a great and serious program for true liberal arts, like education that concentrates, that allows students to concentrate on an interdisciplinary approach to their education. So I thrived there. And then I actually went on to get my master's degree. I stayed at Hofstra in New College to get my master's degree, where I studied philosophy and writing in my undergrad. I carried it over to my master's degree. And then when it was time to graduate, or coming up to time to graduate, I was still so enthralled in my work academically within my master's. And I was given such a chance to explore the subjects that I was doing. Is the master's degree. And New College is very different. Maybe I should get into what New College is, because it's really a unique approach to education in and of itself. But my master's degree very quickly didn't have assigned courses that you had to take. You created your academic path with a professor, with a counselor, and a small committee. but you didn't have necessarily courses that you had to take. You would attend this lecture. You had, here's what I want to study this semester. Here's my focus. Here's my goal. And then you and your instructor, or the person who was overseeing your work that semester, and it changed. You had a primary sort of counselor, and somebody who was sort of like in an academic committee. You had your primary person who was helping you to navigate the entirety of that academic path. But then semester by semester, you had somebody who was sort of your touchstone or the primary focus for that semester. So one semester I did a political philosophy study. One semester I did a study in the linguistics. And so I had all these different kind of focuses. And that being able to sculpt my own interests led me further into the path. Because of course, if you're interested and you get to choose what you want to study, that's going to lead you into more and more curiosity, and more passion about what you're looking at. You're not being dictated to find out, what your actual academic path is. You get to carve that road yourself. I got to do that, and then at the end of that, at the end of my master's program, I looked back and I said, I'm not done with this, and I want to keep learning about my current course, and I don't want it to end. And I looked back at everything that I was interested in academically, and of course it was philosophy. I knew that was going to be a part of it, but really the thing that I was most interested within philosophy was religion and theology, most specifically. And then so I applied to a number of different doctoral programs throughout the country. Got some offers. I thought I was going to come back home to Chicago to be Chicago's got a great theological consortium, and I got a couple of solid offers, specifically at the University of Chicago's seminary program, that I was going to take. It made sense. I was going to get to go home, and be back with my family for the first time in 10 plus years, and I was excited about that. But then Claremont Graduate University in Southern California gave me an offer that I really could not refuse. And offered me one of only a few. I think there was only 5 or 6 openings, or that they had given offers to for their PhD class of 2007 in the Philosophy of Religion and Theology department. So I took it, and I met some amazing people. These are world-class scholars and individuals at Claremont. Did my work, there for 2 years of coursework and dissertation writing and exams and all that. But I also got connected to an independent seminary while I was in Claremont, and did some work with them. And the seminary really focused primarily on educating religious leaders of any denomination or faction. Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever. They were training they were training religious leaders in both academia and their own particular spiritual practices and denominational ones as well. And I was appointed the interim president of that seminary, which was St. Mary's at the time, out of Cortez, Colorado. And we actually moved that seminary from Cortez, Colorado to Claremont, and made it a part of the Claremont School of Theology. I went to Claremont Graduate University, but there's also a Claremont School of Theology in Claremont, and we merged those two seminaries. And more accurately, St. Mary's was a partnership program with the Claremont School of Theology, where our students could also graduate with Claremont School of Theology degree. Claremont School of Theology did great things with marrying in or having other seminarial programs orbit their general course offerings and programs. And so super cool thing that they were doing back then. This has got to be circa, I'd say 2016, 17, probably, I think. So I was the interim president for about 2 years there. But then, yes, as you said, Middletree was really kind of taking off. And I, was very busy with Middletree, and have been, working on all of our programs and keeping that all afloat. And I thought I was gonna, I thought I was gonna do Middletree and kind of hand it off and then go into academia. But that just never happened. I just kept working with Middletree. It was something that I, being the founder, got to also create and do and work on something in ways that I thought was going to be beneficial for those folks we were working with. I love our mission. And I also found that I could continue my own work and actually do an offshoot of my dissertation, which is what I really was passionate about anyways, and do that at the same time. I don't know how I found the time to do everything. It's kind of like maybe, give it to a busy person and it'll get done. But I wrote the first part of the Philosophical War in those initial years. I guess even as I was working on my dissertation, the Philosophical War was almost what didn't make it into the dissertation, but was really my passion. And then I kind of was able to put it all together and expound on that in the years since. So Philosophical War is really what, again, I'm passionate about, what I'm really interested in exploring more academically, intellectually, and otherwise. And then, you read it a number of years ago, and here we are. So.
So I really appreciate you refreshing that history. I knew, a lot of it, and there was stuff I didn't know, and it's really awesome to hear it put together and to sort of follow you on that journey. I've written down several questions, and the really cool thing is that we're announcing a series of discussions, a series of shows. So I don't always have to stop you and say, hey, wait, I want to dig into that, because I'm making notes of things we will unpack later in more detail. Right now, we're going to go to a quick commercial break, which is probably going to be something about you or your work to sort of form the segue into this next segment. And the reason I say that is this is being pre-recorded. This series of discussions will be pre-recorded for release on those Sunday mornings. So anyway, don't go anywhere. We're about to come back and really get into some of the meat of this when we return to Creating the Image of God with Joseph Atman after this short commercial break. We'll see you there.
In a world where the battle of minds goes unnoticed, one man dared to challenge the very structure of consciousness itself. Joseph Atman proudly presents the first part of his groundbreaking collected work, A Philosophical War. Atman's mission is to expose humanity's most elusive adversary, the structure of its own consciousness. He argues that the modern human condition is plagued by a thought process that inflicts unnecessary suffering. This thought process, like a stealthy enemy, wages war against our nature. Atman's quest is both daring and revolutionary, to overthrow and replace the current prevailing conscious structure. He identifies the enemy within and seeks a more coherent and powerful ally. With digestible bursts of epistemological guerrilla strikes, he pierces the lines of everyday thought patterns. This counteroffensive offers a new perspective, one that challenges the way we perceive reality. Atman asserts that humanity's consciousness has relied too heavily on thought alone. He introduces being with, a relationality that harmonizes humanity with the world around us. But the battle doesn't end there. Atman reinterprets the early chapters of Genesis. He calls for the removal of contemporary notions of God while offering a profound argument for God's existence. Filled with intrigue, simplistic insights, and mystical yet realistic hope, this book is a potential landmark work. A Philosophical War by Joseph Atman. Available at Amazon.
Well, welcome back to Creating the Image of God. We're here with Joseph Atman. He's just shared his educational background and how he obtained that PhD in the philosophy of religion after having gotten a stellar 1.7 GPA. Having a daughter who's a senior this year and applying to all these colleges, I'm kind of in awe at how that worked out for you, because here it's the opposite, right? If you don't have a 4.4, you're not going anywhere these days, right? But it's awesome that you found that path, and the rest is history, as they say. So part of that history, though, is Middletree. So what I want to dig in on here a little bit is how your intellectual curiosity was piqued, and how that professor that told you that you had a powerful mind that had a lot of potential. So how does Middletree go about addressing educational needs in such a way that that curiosity is encouraged and furthered rather than stifled?
Mhm. Yeah, we have a very unique approach to how we go about working with our students when they come to our centers. We have a couple of different programs. Now we work with school districts in programs that they request and require. And so in those programs, when we're at schools running a district program, we're doing whatever it is that the districts would like for us to do. However, if students are coming to us directly and are working with us at our centers, we have this very distinctive, and it's a very simple model, but it's an approach that most people don't really take, and yet it's a very obvious one, and it really does harken back to Dr. Griffith saying to me, that I was capable, and to having somebody believe in me. And yeah, I would not have gotten into, maybe even community college with that GPA, but somebody advocated for me and believed in me, and went so far as to almost literally take me by the hand and say, I'm gonna drop you here because this is the place for you. So we try and be that for all of our students who come to us directly, and of course through our district programs. But when students are coming to us directly at our centers, we're able to really work with them on Middletree's exact mission. And our mission is to make sure that education is accessible, that anyone can be a part of what we do regardless of their financial capacity. We want to make sure that it is unlimited. That is to say that students can come. When you're a Middletree student, you can come and work with us at any time that we are open. We're sort of like an academic gym, right? You come to the gym whenever you want to. You don't need an appointment. You can come, you be there for as long as you need to work on whatever you have to, in whatever way works best for you. There's no in time, there's no out time. You show up, you stay there and work for as long as needed. And then finally, we want to make sure that it's personalized. That every one of our students gets a personalized academic path and plan when they're with us. And those are things that our educational system is simply not set up to do. We're certainly not able, even in the public sector, to allow everyone the kind of access that they need, because of course those folks who are living in more difficult conditions, survival is what's going to be primarily most important, of course. It's not your truancy rate and how much you're at school. It's did your family make it through the day, and was it able to feed and shelter itself? So we're trying to take care, to make sure that people who are living in those most difficult situations, they don't have to worry about being on a school's schedule. And we understand that schools, we do not exist to be a critique to the educational system, not at all. We're trying to work with education in a reformative way, and be a support system to school districts and to our current educational system. But the educational system has to operate on a calendar. It has to operate on time. And if you are a student whose family is more or less homeless, or fighting to survive just in general, how often you're in school is not the primary focus. Where of course for a district it is, because they need you in school for a variety of different reasons, not the least of which is that they get funding based on their truancy rates. But also, school districts, teachers, administrators, they all, pretty much all of them, very much care about their students. There are very few people who get into education who are apathetic towards students or humanity in general. I think the vast majority of people who get into education are highly compassionate folks who want to make a real and true difference in people's lives, and yet they get over encumbered by a system that is not set up to work with individuals, but is set up to be a system itself. And so they need people to attend regardless of their circumstances as often as possible, because we've got to not only get you, in the doors for their own financial reasons, but, on a personal level with students, we need them to learn so that we can advance first graders in second grade and second graders in the third grade. And how do you do that? Well, you have to run them through a series of tests, and in order to obtain that information on those tests, they have to be in school, right? So it's this cycle. But if you're not, if you're just not capable of going every day, then why should you be punished for that? So Middle Tree takes a totally different approach to that.
Well, I'm seeing some of the dots here that are being connected from the ideas in the philosophical war around the concepts that we build in our head and how those concepts disconnect us from reality. And you and I have had discussions about that, about we need concepts, we require concepts to make any constructive progress, but then those concepts become calcified and they become the problem itself. And I'm seeing now, also based on my own experience, teaching 4th and 5th grade, how that is, right? Yeah, you go in with the best of intentions, but then there's this system, and in the end, you're serving the system. The system isn't serving you. And, where exactly and when does that, where do we jump the shark? When do we jump the shark in all of these things? That's part of the question. And I can see how the work with each individual person, empowering the mind of each individual to be creative. And I love that you said we're not there to critique it, we're not there to put it down, we're there to support it, but we're also trying to transform it from a positive way. We're not about the forces of destruction, we're about the forces of integration, right? And all of this reminds me of, my audience knows I'm a Baha'i, so I'm going to bring in a Baha'i quote here. First, I'm going to bring in a couple of Baha'i concepts. One is that evil can also be called ignorance, right? Ignorance is the source of all evil. And the degree to which education should be our focal point is really lost on people, right? As we, have this political war going on in our country and everybody's seeking to gain control of power and budgets and, whatever it is to pursue their agendas and their ideologies, the solution is always education. But it's not about controlling education, right? We talked earlier about what just happened today, which is that Barry Weiss and the Free Press was acquired by Paramount as they seek to, position CBS as a more centrist, more open news. What does this have to do with anything? Well, Barry Weiss said it used to be all the news that's fit to print, and now it's all the news that fits the narrative. Well, the narrative exists to support the institution or to support the policy or to support the power or the perspective or the party in power or whatever it is. There's a narrative, a story that gets told, right? And even the Genesis story, right? The story about the tree of the knowledge and the good and evil, it's exactly that kind of thing. We've talked about how foundational it is. And I love that you went in and reinterpreted it, right? So my point being that education to eradicate ignorance and to enable all the minds to be empowered to use the strength and the capacity that they have for independent investigation. So now back to the point of this little monologue, the article that I read today in something called BahaiTeachings.org was titled Science, God's Greatest Gift to Humanity. Now, I took a little umbrage at that title, Science, God's Greatest Gift to Humanity. Seemed like a bit of an overstatement. But when I read the article, they're quoting Abdu'l-Baha here in this article. And it says, all blessings are divine in origin, but none can be compared with the power. There's that kind of concept that you were told. You have a powerful capacity in your mind, Joe. What was the exact words that they used, or that this professor used to describe your potential back in high school? You shared a little while ago.
And I think you should use it.
You have a very powerful mind, right? And here it is. Abdu'l-Baha's agreeing with that professor. All blessings are divine in origin, but none can be compared with the power of intellectual investigation and research, which is an eternal gift, producing fruits of unending delight. Man is ever partaking of these fruits. All other blessings are temporary. This is an everlasting possession. Even sovereignty has its limitations and overthrow, right? I mean, they're pursuing power, right? Power politics, coups, elections. Even sovereignty has its limitations and overthrow. This is a kingship and dominion which none may usurp or destroy. Briefly, it is an eternal blessing and divine bestowal, the supreme gift of God to man, right? The powers of independent intellectual investigation. That whole story of the Garden of Eden was a choice. You know, you can pursue the tree of life, or you can pursue the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In the end, as the Apostle Paul shares, they come back around together, because Paul said that to the Corinthian church, strong meat belongs those who by reason of use have exercised their senses to discern good and evil. So he's praising the tree of knowledge of good and evil when used for its rightful intended purpose, as Abdul Baha here describes. So I just thought I'd throw this into the mix here about how important it is. And, you know, for me, connecting the dots between how you've been approaching education with Middletree. And my apologies for sort of closing out this segment. We're going to go to another commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about, okay, so what next? Having this background and having worked on Middletree and doing what they do, okay, where are you growing next? What do you hope to accomplish as this trilogy expands and as you take a half a step back from Middletree, continuing to oversee it, continuing to make sure that it has the fertilizer it needs, the sunshine it needs, the water that it needs to grow? But where are you growing next? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back and let Joseph Atman answer that question.
Middletree got started by a group of educators who wanted to see education done in a different way.
Socioeconomic status is the primary factor in whether a person is admitted to college at present. And we think that that is simply, well, unfair. And so our mission is to work against that by allowing people from less privileged backgrounds access to the tools that people from more privileged backgrounds are able to have.
The programs that we offer here are tutoring, college counseling, ACT and SAT test prep, and our summer seed program. The tutoring program is unlike any other on the planet that I'm aware of, in that we allow students to be here on a membership basis. Students can come as often as they'd like to without an appointment, and they can be here for as long as they want to.
I really like helping kids understand things that they have been told that they're not good at.
In 6th grade, that's when I noticed like my grades started to like go up, especially in math. That's usually where I need my help.
I prefer to be able to just have fun with the kids in a way that inspires them to want to learn more and to have fun while they're learning.
The way they do it here, like they just have like that vibe, you know, if they make it fun.
We don't have a system here, we don't have a workbook, we don't have an actual program. We have individual students, and we approach each and every individual student as individuals.
I love to go finish my homework so I can go home, chill, and just play video games or something like that.
What Middletree did for me was it gave me back my time after dinner or before dinner to do things with my son that let me be mom. It gave me back my mom time.
I came here and I finished the year with a B in math, which came up from an F, which I totally think is because of this place. I had A's and B's completely.
We really want to make sure that we're reaching people on their levels.
If you don't understand something, they will help you until you feel comfortable with it.
I like to empower my students to use their voices.
They want you to like ask questions, and they want you to like learn better than you ever did before.
Really, all we really want are for our kids to be healthy and happy. And I think Middletree embraces each kid being their best self, being their individualized self.
Welcome back to the concluding portion here of today's show on Created in the Image of God with Joseph Atman. Right before the break, we were talking about education, the importance of intellectual inquiry, and how the divine capacity of consciousness and independent investigation of reality is at the heart and core of everything. Joe, in your book, you talk about that, engaging directly with reality, not through our conceptual frameworks, which are flawed. The minute we have an idea and it sort of solidifies in our head, it's already not reality. All of this that you've learned, studied, shared, and built with Middletree, where are you going next as you get that? The second installment of your book is done and in the editing phase and will be coming out here in the not too distant future. And I'm sure you're working on the third volume. Where is all this going? Where are you growing next?
So the short answer is I don't know. But I'm really curious to find out and to be on the journey. And I'm very grateful to be able to walk it every day. And it's sort of that 10,000 mile journey begins with one step. Where I feel like I'm just kind of going along and going with the flow, as I sort of always have. People ask me some semblance of this question frequently. What do you want to do with Middletree? What do or even it can be, something as more about your personal life. Why have you done this, or why have you not done that? And my answer is always just, I have never had necessarily a plan, and this drives some people crazy, or some people couldn't live like that, and that's fine. And of course there's the old adage, if you want to hear God laugh, make plans, right? Or something to that effect, where I just have frequently, and not that I don't have direction or some path by which I'm hoping to pursue in some general way, but I've always been a very content person. And so I've always just kind of gone with or wherever the day sort of leads me. And I think that's something that I found very difficult about running a business, because I'm so not a businessman by any stretch. And so this is more my wheelhouse, of course. So I'll just be really excited to be able to get back to being able to focus on my not academic, but sort of that academic work, that work that's taking place outside of the traditional field of academia, and be able to explore this together with something or other publishing, and the outlets that and the audiences that I'll be afforded from this platform. And so I'll be writing the third part of the book, which I think is going to actually be the spiciest part, and maybe by some extension something that to say that things are groundbreaking within philosophy. Like, I don't want to sound like it's like so important, or like, so like that I have some esoteric knowledge that no one else possesses. But I think in much the way that the philosophical work, that first part sort of brings to the fore something that was kind of always there all along. The third part really is going to almost kind of take the mask off of some folks or some ideas and some ways and modes of being, and unveil some things and give us some surprises as well. And so I'm really, really excited and anxious to bring that to people's awareness. And I've always discovered, I think I do this work, by and large for myself, because I always discover a lot while I'm doing it, right? Again, I don't have this narrative myself that I'm trying to fit everything into. I have frequently found that I'll be working on something, researching something, looking at something, doing something, and then I'll have a completely different sort of, I don't even want to say final destination, but I'll arrive somewhere that was quite the opposite of the place where I thought we were going. But then the beauty of it is that I don't stay there either. We just keep going, right? And we just keep evolving and keep understanding and keep growing and learning. So I'll be really excited to get this third part sort of underway. As you said, the second part is finished, but in process right now. And I'll be further excited to see how that incorporates with Middletree. As you mentioned, although I'm taking a step back at the moment from day to day and letting professional people who are business folks handle that stuff. But I'm still very much a part of Middletree and overseeing the mission. And as the founder and CEO, still am very involved in the direction of the organization. So I'll be interested to see how, because at every step of the philosophical war journey that I've taken, that's influenced and affected something that we've done at Middletree. So I'll be interested to see what's next with that as well.
Yeah, so there are a couple of comments here. One is, you said earlier, if you want to see God laugh, make plans. And then there's this sort of parallel comment to that, which is, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to end up somewhere else, right? So it's kind of a yin-yang mix of those two things. And as you go along, and now say, what I want to find out next is, when you talk about taking off the mask, right, and challenging people's core concepts, what is the feedback so far, and what do you expect, and how will that change you, right? So do you expect that your work is sort of perfect as it comes out because it's so well thought out? Or do you expect that you will learn something about your own framework, your own concepts that might change? And is that part of why you don't try to, well, to put it differently, this is apparently a quote that's been out there for some time, but I only heard it recently, and that is, strong beliefs loosely held.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, because as I was sort of saying, just a moment ago, is I'll frequently have an idea about where I want to go to. It's kind of like planning out. I love to walk, and I love to hike, and I love to go out in nature. Like, I know the route that I'm going to take, I think. Although on the way there might be a tree, and then you got to go around, or I might see this, other trail that I've never been on, or something over here, so you go different places, or you go different places than you expected, and that's okay, because I do have an idea about what I want to do and where I want to go, but I'm very, very open to letting that unfold in whatever way that it actually does. So with my academic work, with the philosophical work stuff, I'm very frequently will change a thought or a mode or a position based on my own discovery. So I'm never trying to make the work fit the pre-established narrative, as you were just talking with the gal at CBS. Who had mentioned that's what had been happening in journalism, right? Is that it's not what is published is not or what's fit for print, right? Is whatever is out there in the news and in the world, right? But it's got to fit the narrative. Well, I take the exact opposite with my own work. Is I think I know what this is going to look like, but until I really unpack it for myself. And you have to really sit with it, and you have to be honest and open, and really have a dialogue, I think, with yourself. And this is why I don't have that tape recorder anymore. I've got, the same thing we all do, the smartphone, and I record all of my thoughts before I write them down, and before I actually do the writing, because I'm able to talk things out with myself. And actually, a lot of these are up on my website. A lot of the philosophical recordings that I've done over the years are up on the website. There are some longer ones. They're short, long, and medium-sized ones that are almost like their own little podcasts of themselves, but my own philosophical musings amongst myself. And so you can kind of see my process sort of work out. And I'd never really intended that to get out there, but we decided once we had a website, we might as well put that out as content. And I think we're going to put that out in our Substack that's coming out here with, under something or other publishing as well. So anyways, it's almost like I was the original content creator in a lot of ways before there was, all these platforms. And yet I've never been all that interested to get that out there in the current age necessarily, but it is up there. But I'm very open to, and very public about my own process, And I think we all need to sit with it and again have an honest and earnest dialogue within ourselves, quite literally, or with ourselves out loud, as I do and have published out there about certain topics. Because when you work that out with yourself, you discover things about not only the topic itself, but yourself, your position, who you are. And I think that exercise in and of itself is has value beyond value.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. And, you know, having launched into this podcast series, which now is twice a week, I'm meeting with lots of different people briefly to find out if they're a fit for the show. And then I'm actually recording the show with multiple people. And I'm reminded actually of something that you said earlier when you were talking about this Claremont School of Theology and what you did there. And that's out in the neck of the woods where I was living at that time. And when I resigned from the ministry full time to separate my faith from my paycheck, part of what I wanted to do was form like discussion groups. And so for example, I tried to pull this group together, and we started out by saying, look, everyone read Romans chapter 12. And then we'll all come together and we'll talk about Romans chapter 12. Bring your ideas, bring your thoughts. We'll just talk about it. And the people couldn't do it. They didn't have the capacity and the training to just have an open discussion to formulate their original ideas. Part of the reason why I resigned from the ministry was exactly that. People wanted to sit in the pews and be told what it meant.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's much easier.
And I wanted to discover what it really meant by having different perspectives talk about it live, right? And so now we're doing this show, and so it's occurring to me that, we're going to be bringing in other thought leaders and having a variety of discussions, both in Planksip, in article format, but also in live discussions. And we might bring some other people into this dialogue that you and I are having. And it's not a debate. It's not about trying to prove one side right and one side wrong, which is the definition of a debate. Now, obviously, for the listeners of a debate, as those two people, battle it out on the stage, the listeners can form their own opinion, and that's great. But to what degree are the participants in the debate, really listening and really responding live, in a debate?
Yeah,
when
they've
does
got to prove their own point, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's almost like a disingenuous dialogue.
Position. So there's no synergistic arrival at a new position happening.
Yeah, exactly. When your ego is that involved, right? It's a disingenuous dialogue. So like when I'm doing these dictations, with me and myself, there's no place that I'm necessarily trying to go to. I'm just exploring a topic. And those would be the best debates. Is here, let's have two people just talk about something without necessarily a position. They might arrive at something, and they might within that dialogue come to diverge and see that we have a vast gulf here amongst positions, and that's fine. But yeah, it's not necessarily a genuine discovery in those debate formats the way that they're positioned, right? Where it would be very interesting to have. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, to be, and I think this is why podcasts have become such an interesting and sort of robust platform and environment, is because that's kind of what podcasts are. Here, I'll have somebody who has a particular gift or stance or point or take on something, and let's just talk to them about whatever it is. That said, sometimes the problem with podcasts is you just have the host who doesn't know all that much, and then just the expert just talks. So there's not as much of the dialogue. But that's also why I think that some of the more popular podcast hosts are popular, because they are able to engage in an actual dialogue with their guests and have some pushback and have some actual real discussion within that, right?
And this gets back to what you were talking about earlier, and this might be a good place to end it, sort of bring back full circle. When you were talking about the new college and a really robust liberal arts program, right? I have a liberal arts, I have a bachelor degree, in liberal arts. And that was the philosophy, right? So now our bias was the Word of God is the foundation of all knowledge. So it was Bible-based. But it was a true liberal arts program. And yeah, we approached these topics with that biblical bias. But I remember especially Dr. Stavronidis, who, I got an F in Latin literature. So that was my wake up moment. I managed to pull off more than a 1.7, GPA, but I was put on academic probation my first semester because I took the senior level course, and I didn't respect what was going on. I was too ignorant, too opinionated, and didn't have the skills yet to really deal with the material. But Dr. Stavronidis, who taught the class, was awesome, and he fostered that kind of open investigation, right? Which I took then to heart throughout the rest of my education there, and had him again as a senior for the class that every theology student dreaded that you had to pass to get your degree, and I passed it with flying colors, and later got into a discussion with him at a ministerial conference in Colmar, France, in front of the collected European ministry, where I, the student, was using some of the methods that the master had taught me to sort of say, I think you're wrong about this one topic. He's passed on. I never really got to circle back with him to sort of flesh that out. But the point I'm making here is, this dialogue, this independent contribution, and it's fine if we understand somebody's bias, as long as their strong belief is loosely held.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's okay. I mean, you wanna understand where people are coming from and respect that, of course. And I don't think it's anyone's obligation to change the mind of anyone else, but I do think that we're all obligated to engage with one another and be honest with ourselves and engage with one another, not to appease other people, but to politely say that that's not how I see it, per se, and here's why, and maybe not change my mind, but just again be very willing to have that open dialogue. And that's something, especially in light of recent events, that I think we really need to kind of take another look at and go back and make sure that we're doing that with consistency and sincerity, because it's so important to have that open mind and the open dialogue that then inevitably follows, whether that's with yourself or with somebody else. So.
Well, and you've mentioned Something or Other Publishing a number of times, because they will be publishing your books. And Something or Other Publishing, SOOP, we call it SOUP. SOUP Media is the company now that owns Something or Other Publishing and has also acquired Planksip. So as we put these various components together to have this kind of dialogue, right? I look forward very much with you to figuring out, okay, how does Planksip fit into this, right? Because Planksip is a philosophical outlet that focuses on trying to present new ideas, original ideas, fresh ideas from all over the place in such a manner that they might be taken seriously by academia, right? And so there are a number of components here that are coming together, and I love the way you framed it of, we don't really know we know the sun will come up tomorrow, but will it be a cloudy day, a rainy day, a hot day? Will there be a big wind? Will there be a storm? We don't know exactly. And we're looking forward to finding that out together. I think we're at a really interesting juncture here in the journey that started when I got a hold of your book and started reading and said, I got to talk to this guy. What is he going on about here with, our concepts are flawed and we're not even engaging with reality and all this stuff. So, Joe, it's really been a pleasure getting to know you better, even right here on this podcast. Anything you want to add here as we wrap it up for today? We'll pick up where we left off next time, of course, which I can't predict exactly when it'll be, probably 3 or 4 weeks from now, maybe 5 or 6. We'll try to target a month, but I'm not setting any specific dates in the sand right now. That'll unfold over the next couple of months, probably.
Yeah, no, just that, again, I'm really thankful that my work has found a home and found a champion in you and the folks at Something or Other and SOUP Media. And I'm just excited to see what lies ahead, and I hope people find it useful at this point and stage in my life and career. I don't want, I'm content, right? I've done the work already. If it resonates with people, if there's an audience for it, wonderful. But I'm just happy that I get to do it, and that there is an outlet for it so that people can access it if they'd like to. So I'm really excited just to get on with it and keep doing it. So
awesome. Well, we'll welcome you back here very soon. Meanwhile, there's one more thing we have to do today, and that is to air the sneak peek for next week's show. So stay tuned. That'll come up next. And for everybody else, remember, you're created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. We'll see you next week. Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson back with another sneak peek for Created in the Image of God. I have a guest that I've been so looking forward to interviewing on the show. His name is Mark Oppenheimer. He says that he likes his religion somewhat traditional. He's Jewish here in America. And on the political sphere, he might be somewhat more left of center. His work, as he described it to me in our brief preparation for this interview, is he likes to objectively report on things, obviously to help people form their own opinions, but he sometimes offers his own as well. So he's an interesting mix of what America needs more of, in my opinion, right now. Welcome to the studio, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, we always like to let our guests know a little bit about who it is that we're interviewing. So how would you describe your upbringing and background?
I'm a New Englander. I was raised in Springfield, Massachusetts, the eldest of 4 children, 2 Jewish parents, very different kinds of Judaism. My father was from the what is called classical Reform tradition that was created by German and Central European immigrants in America. My mother's parents were both from Orthodox backgrounds, but had become communists, so very aggressively secular in their outlook. And so I sometimes joke that I was uniquely bred to be indifferent to religious observance, but somehow it didn't work out that way. And then I went to college and ended up doing a PhD in religious studies, but never with the idea of being a scholar, always much more interested in going into reporting and bringing religion and religious news to a broader public rather than staying in academia. So, and fortunately it all worked out.
Well, I'm excited to interview you because my audience knows I'm serially putting out a series of articles, writing a book on the role of religion in civilization building throughout history. It's a sort of a, for dummies, right? I'm no scholar either, but looking back, starting with Adam, Abraham, Noah, what did these people contribute, and then Moses, of course, and Jesus, but also Muhammad, Buddha, civilization's rise, Göbekli Tepe taught us this, that, first came that temple that you're probably familiar with this, and the religious idea, and civilization arose from the idea of religion. So this mix that you probably got from your parents, how do you incorporate this view in your reporting and writing?
Well, I come from a tradition, Judaism, that has a lot of room for argument. That's in fact, a sacred gesture in the religion. So the halls of study, the Bate Midrash, the Beit Midrashes, are places where people pair up in what are called chavrusas, which is partners. You learn together 2 at a time, and you sit over a text and you argue over it, and you share competing observations. And the text itself are often books of the Talmud, which is a record of disputations among rabbis fighting over how to interpret things and arriving at conclusions. I mean, it's literally a record of arguments. So we are truly the anti-literalist, anti-fundamentalist religion. Argument is totally essential. Contesting is totally essential. So that's in the tradition. My parents were both very much that way. Nothing was ever handed to us as dogma, in anything, in religion, in politics, in life. We were encouraged to argue with them. Not that they didn't have this final say in their household when we were growing up, but there was certainly no because I said so. I mean, it was always, you explain stuff, you talk about stuff, you quarrel about stuff. And then I entered into, a guild of journalists where part of the job is to always be seeking different points of view. So I think that in a lot of ways, starting with my religious heritage, I'm inclined towards skepticism, argument, disputation. The other thing that I would say Judaism and the Abrahamic faiths give us specifically, which I think is very much in my intellectual DNA, is a kind of anti-relativism. I mean, remember that it's Torah, it's the Old Testament that says there's one God, not multiple gods. You have to worship this one God, and anything else is idol worship. And so they were saying to a world of people that was organized by warring tribes, each of whom had their own local divinities, their own local icons. They were saying, actually, that doesn't work. Your icons are not as good as ours. In fact, they're idols. There's one God. And what that means, of course, is that there's one set of ethics. So it means that if rape is wrong in this town, it's wrong in this town. If stealing is wrong in this town, it's wrong across the valley 20 miles away. That's really, really important. I mean, that's how you end up with meaningful systems of justice. That's how you end up with a Rawlsian idea like justice as fairness, is that you say there's whether you want to say one God or one morality or one set of rules, the idea that it not only can apply to everyone, but has to apply to everyone is really essential to civilization.
So the idea of a true north, right? But people coming at it from the north, south, east, west will have different perspectives and views. There's maybe a thesis and an antithesis, and it's up to each person to form their own synthesis in light of understanding that there is a true north. Is that
right?
fair?
And more, yeah, absolutely. And more than that, I mean, Judaism teaches that we do not teach that everyone should be Jewish. In fact, there was a specific covenant with a specific group, with a family, with one family, and it's a permeable family. It's a family that you can marry into and be adopted into. It's not just bloodlines, but nevertheless, it is a family, a kinship network, and they are supposed to have Jewish practices, but Gentiles are not supposed to have Jewish practices. They're supposed to have the practices of whatever their communities are.
But even there, you have the Noahide covenant, right? And
right.
The righteous among the nations. So there was a full standard for all people, and then the Jews had specific requirements that were not applied to everybody else.
Yeah, and by the count of Maimonides, the medieval Iberian sage, there are 613 mitzvot or commandments that apply to Jews. Many of which are not practicable without the temple. I mean, unless and until a temple gets rebuilt, there's several hundred of them that are irrelevant. But there are still, a couple hundred that are relevant and apply to Jews, and some apply according to Orthodoxy to Jewish men, and others to all Jews, but to Jews. And then there are 7 Noahide laws that apply to everybody. Do not, honor thy father and mother, and do not kill, and things like that. So. Is
blood also that you shouldn't be eating blood? Is that one of the Noahide laws?
Yeah, the dietary laws are not among the Noahide laws, I don't think.
Okay.
So
we'll research it before the show.
Yeah.
I'm gonna crash land this plane now, but everyone needs to tune in, because what we're seeing here.
We're gonna keep going.
This is the sneak peek, short one. So what we're seeing here, folks, is that you can't really truly understand the modern world and some of the issues and challenges that we're having on the face of this planet right now. Some of the top issues can be much better understood by taking a little bit of what Mark has, which is that deep study into religion and its role in society. So Mark, I could not be more excited about spending a whole hour with you in front of a live audience on October 1st.
No,
anything you want to add? Because I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you said October 1st. That's wrong. It's October 21st.
October 21st. Thank you for correcting me. See,
no,
we're not going to argue about that. We're going to settle on October 21st.
I have nothing to add. It'll be great. It'll be great fun.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. See you there.